Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, with some last-minute thoughts, day of the fight, on Saul Alvarez versus Trout. Now remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's do a group exercise, right? Let's remember a champion who hits hard. How hard? As I make this video, he sports a better than 70% knockout ratio, right? This champ, or former champ, beat Shane Mosley. This champ beat Zab Judah, in fact knocked out Zab Judah, in New York City. This champ fought current champion Paulie Malignaggi and broke his jaw and beat him in New York City. In other words, this guy is beating elite, hard-to-beat fighters in their backyards. He also avenged a loss to Antonio Margarito, beating him in New York City. Statistically, this fighter also gave, if you go off punch stat numbers, Floyd Mayweather his toughest fight in several years. Now, I want everyone to just close their eyes for a moment and just think about Miguel Cotto and think about what punch Cotto throws best. What's his primary weapon? I'm going to pause for 3 seconds while we contemplate it. In my opinion, and each of our opinions are valid, Miguel Cotto's best weapon is his left hook. It's a devastating punch, right? Cotto is the kind of guy who, quite frankly, is able to muscle even elite fighters like Floyd Mayweather over to the ropes and land devastating left hooks. Look at the Carlos Quintana fight, right? Cotto ends fights with left hooks. Let me also say, too, that Saul Alvarez fighting in this fight, his primary weapon, in my opinion, take a look at the Carlos Baldomir tape, is his left hook. Both of these guys have huge punching power with that lead left hook. Now let's backtrack just a smidge. Do you remember the moment in the Miguel Cotto-Austin Trout fight where Miguel Cotto, who has superior foot speed to Canelo, who cuts off the ring better than Canelo, do you remember when Cotto was able to land that left hook on Austin Trout? And do you remember when Austin Trout, how hurt he was, how he was holding on for dear life, how Austin Trout had to gather his thoughts and scrape by to barely survive that round? Do you remember that moment in that Miguel Cotto-Austin Trout 12-round fight? Me neither. That moment never happened. Austin Trout can defend even the best left hooks in boxing, right? Miguel Cotto, you didn't even realize that Miguel Cotto was the huge power puncher that he is. As I said, he's sporting a better than 70% knockout ratio right now, fighting big names like Zab Judah, Paulie Malignaggi, right? Shane Mosley, Austin Trout, and he's still above 70%. But even Miguel Cotto, against defensive brilliance, was unable to meaningfully land left hooks in that fight. Right? Now, I'll agree that Saul Alvarez also has a straight right hand. which is something I don't believe Cotto has. Cotto's more one-handed than Saul Alvarez. I'll concede that point. But my point to you is simply, if you're expecting Saul Alvarez to just come in and land left hooks on Austin Trout, aren't you kidding yourself? Right? You know, not only that, think about it. Miguel Cotto is a guy who knows how to get inside and land that left hook to the body. Does Canelo fight inside as well as Miguel Cotto? I'd say no. So however good Canelo's left hook is, if he's more of an outside fighter, fighting Austin Trout, a guy with superior foot speed to him, and if Cotto, a guy who moves better, who's better inside, couldn't land that left hook, then Canelo supporters here online in the comment section to this video, tell us how Saul Alvarez is going to frame that left hook to actually land it on Austin Trout. I don't think he is. Now let's talk straight right hands, right? Understand the dynamic that Canelo typically sets up, right? Canelo is fighting a right-handed fighter most of the time. If you don't believe me, just look at his record. Let me read some of the names. Josecito Lopez, righty. Shane Mosley, righty. Kermit Cintron, righty. Alfonso Gomez, righty. Ryan Rhodes, righty. Matthew Hatton, righty. You see the problem. By the way, those are all the guys that Canelo has fought since calendar year 2011 began. Right now, Canelo is fighting an elite southpaw. So let's talk about the dynamic on Canelo's straight right hand. Canelo's accustomed to touch you with his left jab, right? You're blinded by the jab. Then that right hand just pops in, right? So the right hand is set up where Canelo's able to hide it and deliver it. How do you do that against a southpaw like Austin Trout where you're not landing that left jab? I don't expect Canelo to land that left jab. So, let's ask ourselves, is Canelo agile enough to lead with straight right hands? Right? Is he agile enough to lead with straight right hands? Power shots without leaving himself open to being countered by a sharpshooting technician, right? Call me a skeptic. I'll agree, Canelo has one punch KO power in both hands. He can take you out with a left hook. He can take you out with a straight right hand. But he's fighting a southpaw. I don't believe he's the better athlete in the ring. I don't believe he has the better stamina in the ring. I don't believe he moves as well as Austin Trout. How's he going to deliver either that straight right hand or that left hook? I have my questions. Now let's get outside the box a bit and talk stylistically. I believe this fight is going to look a lot like the first Vladimir Klitschko versus Tony Thompson fight. Now that's a fight, in my opinion, where, and I know YouTube Nation disagrees with me, but I believe the heavyweight championship should have changed hands by the fourth round of that fight that night. And keep in mind, boxing is an event-based business. You don't have to be the better man. You just have to be the better man that night. By the fourth round of that fight, that night, it was clear that Vladimir Klitschko was in trouble. Tony Thompson, like Austin Trout, is a southpaw. Tony Thompson, like Austin Trout, plays the angles. Vladimir Klitschko could not land his left jab. He couldn't hit Thompson with a left hook. That huge part of Vladimir Klitschko's game was taken out, right? The person who realized it in real time as the fight went forward was Emanuel Stewart, who was practically begging his fighter to do something, right? Now, Tony Thompson did some things wrong in that fight. First, let's face it, Tony Thompson is not the athlete Vladimir Klitschko is. Vladimir Klitschko is one of the best athletes in the sport, right? Just as an athlete, Klitschko moves well. He can move around the ring on an athletic basis, right? Just, Klitschko stamina-wise, you don't really see Klitschko huffing and puffing late in fights, right? He has the stamina. He has the athleticism. But he was being out-techniqued. He had a problem getting to Tony Thompson. Now, Thompson, that night, for whatever reason, and I'm sure Tony Thompson regrets this, just didn't move around the ring as much as he should have. He should have had more lateral movement. Thompson seemed to be on tracks. Thompson, at times, looked like Mikhail Kessler, right? Just kind of like back, forward, back, forward. What he needed to do was bob and weave a little bit and go side to side. Keep Vladimir Klitschko guessing. Sooner or later, Klitschko figured out how to land that straight right hand, and he was able to deliver it later in the fight. Now think about how that fight would have been different if, like Canelo, Austin Trout, Tony Thompson was actually the superior athlete. Just imagine if Tony Thompson moved better than Vladimir Klitschko. By the way, as it was, Tony Thompson had the better punch stat numbers. Look it up. First fight. Right now, if Tony Thompson had the better punch stat numbers and more athleticism than Vladimir Klitschko, I believe the belt would be around Thompson's waist, or at least around Thompson's waist, until the guys had their rematch, right? Let me just point out, too, in the rematch, Vladimir Klitschko abandons his usual technique and literally starts freestyling. And that's how he ends up catching up with Tony Thompson after, again, getting beaten in the first round of the rematch. I'm expecting Canelo, who is much younger than Vladimir Klitschko. In other words, I know Canelo's had a lot of fights, but there's a certain experience that comes with years in the ring, right? Years at the championship level that I don't think Canelo has. He's still a young guy. He's still developing. He's more undeveloped than Vladimir Klitschko. I think Canelo's going to come into this fight. He's going to find that he can't land anything left-handed on Austin Trout. Miguel Cotto had a problem landing on Austin Trout. I don't expect more from Canelo. I think he's also going to realize that he can't hide that straight right hand. He doesn't have the experience against southpaws. Then, of course, fatigue's going to start to set in. I've seen Canelo take off whole parts of rounds. As you get into the later rounds, which one of these guys is going to be in better shape? Right? Austin Trout, who beat Canelo's brother, going the distance in Mexico. Austin Trout, who beat Miguel Cotto, going the distance in New York City. Austin Trout, who went the distance with Delvin Rodriguez, very difficult fighter. Right? I'll give Delvin his props here in this video. Or Canelo, who, quite frankly, has looked winded at times in fights. Yes, he went the distance with Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley, at this point, himself has stamina problems. You don't believe me? Look at the Floyd Mayweather-Shane Mosley tape. Where was Shane Mosley after round 6? In fact, forget what I'm saying. Right? Just listen to Mosley's cornerman, Naseem Richardson, in the later rounds talking to his fighter, right? So my point is simply this. If Austin Trout jumps out on the punch stat numbers, just like Tony Thompson did, I don't think Saul Alvarez has enough to close the show, right? I think Saul Alvarez is like Vladimir Klitschko, only with less pound-for-pound athleticism, right? And I think he's fighting the superior athlete in this one, right? The bet I like, quite frankly, is Austin Trout to win the fight. You're getting something like a plus 200. He's the underdog, right? I like the underdog to win the fight, hedged against Saul Alvarez by KO. Alvarez, a puncher, always has a puncher's chance. But make no mistake, if Austin Trout pushes him, Austin Trout might well get a stoppage, right? I'm also intrigued by the under 9.5 rounds as a hedge, right? Because I believe, quite frankly, that if Canelo doesn't get a stoppage in the first 9.5 rounds, he's not going to get a stoppage. So an alternative bet, depending on the odds you get, would be Austin Trout to win the fight, hedged with the under 9.5 rounds. The reason why that might be a superior play to Austin Trout to win the fight, hedged against Canelo by KO, is because if Austin Trout gets the KO within the first 9.5 rounds, before the midway point of the 10th round, you would win both sides of the bet, not just one side. So I like Austin Trout in this one. I think he's the likely winner. I think Canelo only has a puncher's chance. Now, before I go further, let me just say, and it's a philosophical difference here, different approach. Many people in boxing, people like Harold Letterman, are on record as saying that Canelo is special. He expects Canelo to walk through Austin Trout, right? He thinks Trout's a nice guy. He just thinks Trout is overmatched. Now, in an earlier video, I said that I just disagree with Letterman. Let me say this too. It's counterintuitive. Sometimes boxing insiders are at a disadvantage. They're just too close to the fighters, right? I have no doubt Saul Alvarez is a great human being, right? He is one of the few guys in boxing with real charisma. When I see Saul Alvarez, I always stop and watch the video, right? Great guy, great kid, right? Hard worker, everything good with the sport of boxing. Unfortunately, for him, in my opinion, that doesn't increase his hand speed, right? Him being a great guy outside the ring doesn't increase his stamina. I'm on the other side of the street from Harold Letterman, right? A guy can sound great in an interview. Okay, great. That means I'm impressed with his skills as being an interviewee. That doesn't mean to me that the guy is all that in the ring. Also, I know Saul Alvarez is unbeaten. Understand, boxing has two sides of the story. Austin Trout is unbeaten. I understand Saul Alvarez is mentally tough, has survived tough moments in fights, the Gomez fight, the fight against Cotto's older brother, right? Saul Alvarez has come back from adversity in fights. Understand who Austin Trout is. As I said earlier, he fought Rigoberto Alvarez in Mexico. He fought Miguel Cotto in New York City, right? Some guys, Austin Trout reminds me of a Zuma Nelson. Some guys, for whatever reason, are energized by fighting an opponent in their backyard, right? Austin Trout just strikes me as one of those guys. I don't believe this moment is going to be too big for him. How could this moment possibly be, even with more fans in the stands, bigger than fighting Miguel Cotto in New York City, knowing that Cotto in New York City beat Mosley, beat Judah, beat Malignaggi, right? So, I'm going to disagree with the casinos. I'm going to disagree with Harold Letterman. The question for me is, what does Canelo do when he realizes he can't land his left hand? Does he have the athleticism to actually go after Austin Trout, given that Trout's a sharp shooter? You want to know why Delvin Rodriguez looked bad against Trout? Just Google Delvin Rodriguez online. A very good source. Delvin Rodriguez himself, in a post-fight interview, discussed how he sensed that Austin Trout was laying traps for him, so he couldn't jump in. This is a veteran fighter in his 30s who's been through wars against warriors like Powell Wolak, right, who himself has been overseas fighting in big fights. And he's in with Austin Trout, and he sensed that Trout's an advanced talent who was setting traps for him. Now, if there's something in the dynamic of a fight that had Delvin Rodriguez treading carefully, one wonders what Canelo's going to do if he can't land his left hand and he can't frame that straight right hand. Understand, Vladimir Klitschko's athleticism covers up a lot of defects. Does Saul Alvarez have that athleticism? Let me also say this. I was looking through Saul Alvarez's record, and I noticed that many of his fights had wide margin scorecards, right? All I'm saying to you is forget the scorecards. Look at the first 2 rounds of his fight against Cotto's older brother. Look at rounds 2, 3, 4 of his fight against Alfonso Gomez. Right now, I don't know what fight the judges ringside were watching. In my opinion, Saul Alvarez was getting outboxed in both of those moments. Don't you think that Austin Trout is a slicker fighter than both of those guys? How do we know that this fight's not going to be a wide margin Austin Trout victory? Brian Kenny, after Austin Trout's victory over Miguel Cotto, on the air said he had that fight 8-4. In some ways, isn't Miguel Cotto a tougher matchup for Austin Trout than Saul Alvarez? Those are my last minute thoughts. Let me hear yours. Leave your comments here online. If Canelo comes in, dominates, methodically beats Trout, then I still want to hear from you, right? Because I'd want to learn from you on why I was mistaken in this fight. But if Austin Trout puts on a clinic, just know that for some of us, it wasn't unexpected. Thanks for watching.